Le Louvre, translated roughly to The Masterpiece by Émile Zola, was my first Zola book. I had heard of him vaguely before, maybe I think a year or two, a couple of years. I read this and I had heard it was a part of a larger series of, I think it was 12 books were released within Zola's lifetime. And I believe he wanted to start it in 1885, and I think he started right off with this one. So the Masterpiece was actually the 14th series, but he actually, in the series, I think, or maybe he did publish, okay, so 14, and then, but it was also the first he wrote, so it's the last in the series. Kind of interesting. But I'm not sure if that affects, because they are, since it's a series, I'm not sure, kind of in the vein of like Le Comédie Hume, the human comedy by Honoré de Balzac. Obviously great, talent of post Napoleon, Russian. I'm sorry, not Russian literature, French literature, and I'm not sure how much Zola took influence from. I guess it's impossible not to be influenced in some oblique way by Balzac. Not just for French people, but and then you have all the other things, the transcontinental, the trans different national influences too, like Jide. I've just been picking up his stuff recently, even though I feel bad that I hadn't a lot sooner. But yeah, Jide, he was greatly influenced by Goethe, German. So it just, yeah, it's I guess it shows that it's not just an ethnic thing. I think I might have said this point before, but I think Horace said something in a very astute in one of his essays. I think something effective like there being great different nationalities. Like he had a good soft spot for Argentina, Argentine, Latin American type literature in the kind of the national spirit of that. But he also loved a lot of different other stuff too, like this, Cervantes and all these different things and nationalities. So I just find that interesting. Anyway, so yeah, the Louvre by um, Emile Zola is a 18. I think it was published serially by 1885. A lot of these books, yeah, they would publish it seriously. I know that they serially and seriously, I guess, if you're serious about writing, as Zola was. But yeah, but a lot of different authors did this too. Um, Russian authors. I think Dostoevsky did this, with like Crime and Punishment and the Brothers Karamazov, I believe. And yeah, at the end, Tolstoy did, I think, a lot. So it was. It's you don't see that much today, but it was in literary journals. People would pick this up and they would read a chapter of something, and I think maybe as late as something by like Salinger's, like I think he was probably maybe the one of the last to kind of use that, I guess. So anyway, yeah, the masterpiece concerns this man who is a painter named Claude, and he is in the midst of working on this piece. Obviously, he's trying to make it his masterpiece, his chef's d'oeuvre. He's giving it his all. He's the entirety of his life and his like everything is hinged on this. So he is trying to. He's a huge believer in like what he calls open air painting, I believe, and it's a school of naturalism. And here's where the symmetry or the analogy is drawn between painting and visual, all that goes into literary type, because the school of naturalism was both a literary and um, like a visual art too. So you had a lot of painters that were like Claude Manet, I think. No, I'm sorry, not Claude. Manet was impressionist, I think, and I'm kind of flubbing my different artists because I'm kind of mixing up impressionism and naturalism, and then expressionism is a different kind of thing to its own. But as fascinating as it is, but there's also not to be confused with realism. Realism was more concerned with almost like moral truths of the matter, just portraying things starkly and undiscreetly as they are, in a way to actually draw, like portraying things like violence and stuff. And in a way, there are, I think, some similarities between naturalism and realism. But naturalism is more concerned with like the open air, like I said about the painting with the Claude. He's like the school. He went to the school and this with all his comrades in arts, and he's good friends with this I think a novelist named Pierre Sandos, and then an architect named Louise de Bouche, and then yeah, so he's good friends with Zola. Kind of does a little self insertion here with the novelist because there's this novelist character of Sandoz, um, who is a basically gorging himself on this masterpiece, very much like he was in this was planning to write like 20 novels or something, and never got quite to finishing it because he was about middle age, I think, when he started. So let's see, yeah, Zola would have been um, yeah, I think he was 60 something when he died. So basically, yeah, he only, but he got a good amount, like three quarters at least of the way, and that's like, dang. I've got to start reading these, try to catch up. I mean, but yeah, while also trying to read Proust's at the same time, Proust's In Search of Lost Time. But anyway, so yeah, the Le Vosgian Marquette. I'm totally not getting that right, but that's the name of the whole thing. So anyway, Claude the Lantier is trying. Yeah, this he's great painting outdoors, and he believes he's a firm believer in like natural light and seeing things exactly as they are. So that's the kind of naturalism, if I could sum it up poorly, and that's basically um, Paul. Uh, darn, I'm Paul Cézanne. Yes, Paul Cézanne was a notable French naturalist, and he painted in this style. And he was actually good friends with Zola. So here we're going back to autobiographical stuff because Zola was a great writer and ended up, devoting his time to that. And then Cézanne was actually based, he based Claude Lentier off of Paul de Cézanne. So there's a lot of uh, resemblances in that, almost to an eerily part extent, because it ended up actually when Zola was done with it, I heard a story that he gave the book to his friend Cezanne, and basically he never heard from him again. He like dropped the book and then basically kind of cut him off and was like, yeah, their friendship was completely exonerated because basically he was so the way he depicted Cezanne in the book was so like eerily, uncannily. It made it such realism that he kind of was like creeped out about it, and he was like didn't like the way he was depicted. And he's like, yeah, but this character in here, like he can't even differentiate between what's real and what's not anymore. He's like losing his mind. You made me look like a creepy, weird old guy that middle aged guy obsessed with painting nude woman and stuff. It's like I'm not anything like that. Now I don't know how true that is. I'm gonna have to kind of do more research on this, but I do find that an interesting kind of thing. Um, so anyway, but yeah, he has all his art friends, and then his uh he has a his good friend painter is basically there's a lot of like depictions of like bourgeoisie, middle class America, middle um class kind of life, like images and like kind of isolated events that he takes. And one of these paintings that he does is directly influenced by a painting by Edouard Manet, not to be confused with Claude Monet, because Manet painted this thing called Le Déjeuner. Le Déjeuner, that's the only French word I know, is that déjeuner means dinner, I believe. And then petit déjeuner, I believe, is breakfast, because it's like petit means small, obviously petite. Petit déjeuner, I think, is the breakfast. So that's, or lunch, sorry. Is it lunch? Anyway, but yeah, the luncheon on the grass, that's what it translates. By Manet. And it's this famous painting of, I think I've even seen it when I was young. And oddly enough, I wasn't weirded out by it. Maybe because, I'm not sure, maybe because I was kind of like primed a little bit, but I'm not sure. But yeah, so this brilliant painting that he did, it's like expansive, uh, definitely on the open air kind of um, mentality of like just of and you can see it too if you just like look up. You might even recognize it too, like it's because it's that well known historically and culturally. There's just a woman. There's a basically it's two men, I think, and they're sitting across on from each other on a kind of like a picnic blanket, and there's like flowers out, and they're in the park in some kind of open, natural, like nice school. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said school. They're out in the open air, basically, and they're in nature. And there's a woman who's like bearing her chest slightly, and it's not even that much, but it's like enough that it caused a ruckus and a stir, and like these like different art exhibitor, these exhibitions. Like it was hard to for them to get him to publish it, and he struggled for a while, I think. Um, but it's an oil canvas, and he basically put like a lot of work into it, and that is what is the pinnacle of what someone like Claude is trying to work on in the novel. He's basically like obsessing over this huge painting, and he's like trying to get it right. And there's this lady that shows up right off the bat in the novel. Blanking on her name. It was started with an M, and I had it written down somewhere, but um Christine. Yes, I think it's, yeah, Christine. Yes, that's what her name is. Christine ends up coming into his life right out of the blue, and is yeah, right from the get go. He's like fallen for her, kind of like but he tries to keep it kind of, he tries to keep himself like objective, and tries to only see her as she is, and like, and then paints her in the nude, and basically, but it can't help himself, but there's like the form, that kind of paternal, archetypal kind of relationship between like a the artist, professional artist, and the uh subject, where you're like the subject, and it almost do back like a Hegelian kind of master slave dialectic, where that just the basic philosophical object and subject kind of differentiation, where there's a distinction between those two, but yet one needs the other, like one the artist needs the subject in order to actually find inspiration, and um some recompense for setting, and paint and inspiration and everything. He needs Christine, and even though maybe Christine doesn't have the talent that he has, she is very much the muse, the classic kind of archetypal muse, and she's this young girl that kind of stumbles into his life, and then he can't get her out of his head, and then he's like, well, it has to be right, and then uh, but at the same time, he doesn't. There's a bit of like a Pygmalion type of thing, like the thing of Pig. I'm not sure how much was the Pygmalion. Basically, the myth was that he was a sculptor, not a, no, maybe a painter. No, he was I think a sculptor, and that his sculptures became a Greek myth. So realistic that they ended up coming to life, so that and then one of his sculptures was a beautiful woman that he made, so that they could come to life, and basically, and you see that trope show up time and time again, this idea of like creating something that's in your own, like almost like in a godly form, like a the biblical, Genesis kind of way of breathing life into something, and you're making something out of your subjective thing, creation that isn't quite real, or is realer than real, and you're making it out to be something, and you're putting it on a pedestal. So in that sense, there's something to be said about artists maybe over glamorizing certain things, or the poet maybe too. But yeah, there's this thing, or not just artists, but like, as a whole, men in general making women out to be certain things that they aren't, and having to live up to this impossible kind of standard of perfection, because like if you kind of like lay at, if you just kind of bow down at the feet of them, and kind of just give them, and everything that they want, I guess, like with endless, compliments, it's and flatteries, like you kind of set yourself up for disaster, I think, in a way. But yeah, so there's that, and he ends up at a standstill impasse with his painting, because he cannot figure out how to get the color just right, and he's like, I know I can't get the color just right, so I want natural light. But he ends up going to like different settings and different backgrounds, and trying to like figure out like what is the right thing, but he can't quite figure, like he can't figure it out. Like, and then he ends up kind of like weeks and I think even months. I think he puts it down and then ends up um, for going back to like different thing. Like basically at a complete uh, almost like breaking point in his mental health as well. And his friends start to worry about him, understandably, because they fear that he might be slipping into kind of like the bowels of madness, like a um, not Herkheimer, but Heinrich. I think what was his name? The poet that like went mad. It wasn't Heinrich Schiller, but it was Holderlin, I think, went mad. They fear like something like that might happen. Not that I mentioned, but it's like something that might happen. But anyway, so yeah, they finally he basically there's an interesting thing to do with like the he starts seeing what kind of excuse me what kind of like puts a what's the phrase, something really kind of gets to him, and it's the fact that he sees all these different like newbies coming into the trade, younger people using similar like themes that he has, like of the open air and natural uh backgrounds, like in the out in the light and the sun, and surrounded by wildlife, and he starts to see these similar things pop up in younger people's work, but it's there are people who don't have even half or even a fraction of the skill that he has, yet they're using it and co-opting it and kind of like his exact same kind of things, yet they don't have the that artistic integrity, that like sworn commitment to the craft of like, I will be dead and dying starving in the streets before I even give up my this my kind of secrets of the trade, or my before I let sell myself out. And these people obviously don't have that, the new generation, so they it's kind of like that similar thing that everybody feels as an artist, anybody like I kind of feel that there are people who use writing in a way that's kind of cheap and like using like narrative devices um, that are like a shorthand to kind of like say something edgy, yet they're at the same time they're like, yeah, man, I'm just it's postmodernist, man. It's just meta. It's just whatever. And it's just like they're just using it to kind of hearken to things that have already been said and not really saying anything new. And they're just kind of I don't know, but like it's like a I see people doing a similar thing, and so I think Zola is definitely onto something that's like a lifelong kind of imprint of different things that you see encoded, I guess, for lack of a better word, in history and society, and as far back as Greek myth, like I said with Pygmalion too, like you see these dynamics of like subject and object, artist and this, and how it kind of shows up in each kind of generation, like and something D.H. Lawrence said too is like with D.S. Lawrence, talking about like the working man, like he was very much for the working class, and even though there was like kind of a masculinity about his writing and the way he talked about sexuality, he was very kind of male centric in a way. But he also talked about kind of this letting women be themselves and like letting them not like what would happen if Lady Chatterley was given free license to just not have to be beholden to this one man, and to actually go out and to live for once, and I'd like to do jump Bovary, Emma Gemma Bovary, by Flaubert, some of these days, but I'm really rusty. It's been like a good 4 or 5 years since I've read it, so I've got to have to definitely kind of do a little bit more digging for that. But yeah, I think that is all for the masterpiece, or the Le Louvre by Emile Zola. Um, yeah, it ends with forgot there was an ending that was like at least kind of a little bit on the brains, but basically with his uh spoiler alert, it ends with Claude actually committing suicide, um hanging from the scaffolding of a building, and then the only people who actually end up at his funerals are his good kind of friends of the novelist Sandeau, and then his Bongard and all, but they all kind of recognize his like contributions in the end. Like it's kind of like a post, like, like life Kafka-esque kind of legacy of like only being kind of, truly appreciated past all like kind of the absurdity and the kind of like temporal ephemerality of like phases and style and what's in fashion, what's in vogue, like that. His stuff is actually outlives that, in that, I guess, in a historical kind of way, I guess it actually works out. So that is it for the masterpiece. Thanks for watching if you made it this far. um yeah, I'll see you in the next one.